Kyle, CJ Berg here with DevelopEV, and today we got a special guest, and he is my captive guest as we are driving back to Phoenix from Dooner's Diner. We just had some site visits in the Imperial Valley, Los Angeles, and where else? Orange County, Anaheim. And we're heading back to Phoenix now. So Jacob is an electrician. He works for Booth Electric, and today we're just gonna talk about what it's like being an electrician in the EV industry. So when it comes to being an electrician in like the EV space, like what are some like differences? Like if you're a commercial electrician today, you've been doing warehouses, gas stations, what have you, and you're getting into EV. What are the big differences? What are the things that like kind of help to know?
There's a lot of it. Really depends on what type of EV chargers you'll be installing and what kind of companies you'll be installing them for. There's a lot of if you get into the fleet world, working for some of the larger fleets, there's a lot of you have a larger scope, more of dealing with civil work and the full complete project rather than just the electrical side. But it really depends on what you want to focus in. If you're going to be installing in parking garages, there's a lot of pipe work, a lot of planning. There's a lot of efficiencies that you can help yourself out with if you plan right. Having a plan can really benefit what you do, and learning the equipment that you're installing and figuring out what is going. There's so many differences and tolerances between everything that it really helps to learn and figure out exactly what you're installing before you install it, just because you can really get yourself into a bad situation. And then with it being such a developing industry, stuff's changing on a day-to-day basis, and you just kind of want to make sure there's a lot of future proofing is what I've seen. Really think about what may happen in a year, what may happen in a couple years, even 6 months. I mean, we've been on jobs where and 2 months later, one charger wasn't working. We had to switch to a whole nother charger. The new charger required an extra wire, so making sure you had the capabilities to do that. You can't future-proof everything, but it's definitely beneficial to think ahead and look ahead and think about kind of where it may go and on that side.
Nice. And like how the work is like, it's so like if you're like a new electrician in this industry, some of your guys, like how do they like these projects compared to maybe some of the more conventional projects that they've worked on?
It goes either way. You get guys that like different stuff. A lot of my guys really enjoy it. We can get into a good sized job and get in and get out of there pretty quickly. We don't have to be on a job for say a year, and we're still dealing with some big equipment or even some small equipment, but there's pretty quick satisfaction. So you can get guys that rather than get into the hamster wheel where you're just doing the same thing day after day after day on a year-long big commercial project, you can see a lot of growth and a lot of success and kind of completion of work really quickly on some of these projects, and guys can get exposed to a lot of stuff really quick. So that's one thing that the guys like. They're in a lot of different areas, so we see in different areas of the state or the country, and working in different environments. You're
Like El Centro.
Yeah, like we're living in El Centro. I never thought I'd be living in El Centro. So yeah, just working in different environments. You're having to work around different companies that you could be possibly working with. Say you're working with a delivery company like FedEx. Well, you're working around moving trucks and you're working around their day-to-day operations. So you really have to be efficient with your time and really think about how we can least impact the people we're working for, because we're there to help them, and they kind of have to get their day-to-day going without affecting. We can't affect their day-to-day operations.
Yeah. And then when it comes to like the chargers, kind of as you talked about, things are kind of constantly changing. You had to rip out one that wasn't working. Like, what are some of the things you see about chargers, like on the DC fast charging side, that you kind of see are kind of more of the future from like an electrician standpoint? You're like, okay, this was easy to install. This one seems to have a lot of future-proofing things built in. It seems like it has more of a pathway towards being something more ubiquitous in the future.
They're definitely moving in that direction. The chargers are getting nicer and nicer as we come. They're getting better owner's manuals. They're learning stuff about them. Some chargers are really cumbersome. They don't have good lifting points. These are big, heavy chargers. I mean, your typical 184 DC fast charger is about 700 pounds. So you can get in some awkward situations, especially if you're getting into like parking garages and stuff where you can't use your normal forklift to move stuff. You have to make different have different means of lifting. So getting lifting points and them kind of working around how you can work with them a little better, not as and then they're also working. Some of them have very like they're all about the aesthetics. The ones with the aesthetics are very hard because they're not as easy to work with. There's more pieces that have to come apart and stuff like that. So I think a lot of these companies are starting to they're seeing more. Um, they're learning from a lot of the installs that they already have, and they're learning from they're testing and measuring. So there a lot of things are developing on that end to get make things more user friendly on the install side. And also the companies and the engineers and everything are learning a lot of how we can better work with kind of coming up with standards on how we can maybe if we have to switch a charger, we have to change different capacities down to a different kW or something like that, that it's not going to be as hard to switch stuff out and kind of work that way. A lot of the chargers are really hard to, like, say, pull wire after the fact because there's so much electronics inside that there's not much room that some of the new ones are giving us a little more area to do that with the charger already installed in case you have to change stuff. Some of the chargers don't require neutral, some do. And that's kind of, when you talk about a big long pipe run, where you're pulling 500 MCM cable, that can be pretty tough to add a new wire in after the fact. Like, that's kind of a nightmare, but it's one of those future-proofing things and thinking about kind of what could come and stuff like that. And also making the companies you're working for bringing up some of these issues, because a lot of them are receptive to them, they just don't know them. So bringing up the issues with the companies you work with to be like, hey, if you want to put in one more wire in day one, it's going to cost you about $1,000. But if you want to do this later on, this could be a huge issue. And this potential charger that you've tested and actually needs that cable. So really keep expanding your knowledge and making people aware of the knowledge that you have, and kind of just help everyone around you to try to give them a greater understanding of the whole process and what could possibly come down the road.
Yep. And to that last point, like I appear to be an electrician, but I am not. And it's really helpful to have an electrician too that's very knowledgeable and wants to help and helps to kind of inform us of like, hey, you might be shooting yourself in the foot if you don't think about a couple of these things to help for future installs if you change your charger out or if you do different things. So that's always super helpful, that knowing that the customer is not always going to know all the technical details that you and I have spent 8 hours so far talking about and that we enjoy, but not every customer is going to have that.
No, for sure. And then you're going to get also making helping the engineers out. I mean, engineers are engineers. They're great. They're smart. They've gone to school, but there's a lot of on-site conditions and unknown conditions that come up. For instance, yesterday we were out of site. We're installing chargers right now to vehicles that have never even been on a site. We haven't even physically seen the vehicle.
Yeah.
So sometimes stuff is got to be field verified. Like, these cables are short on some of these chargers. You're not going to be, they got dual holsters, but you're not going to be able to charge two cars or two, say, garbage trucks from one area if you put the charger in the wrong location by just maybe 1 foot. If you turn it sideways, you're not going to have the cable reach. So there's a lot of just like the deeper dive into the projects, I think, beforehand, and not just building the plans, really diving into the project, looking throughout the whole scope, figuring out and thinking about the end product and the end customer it's been a huge benefit for us, and hopefully we're adding that benefit to the customer in the end customer and the user, because the last thing you ever want to do, or me as an electrician, is want to install something that doesn't benefit the person that actually is using it on a day-to-day basis.
All right, so I think one other thing that we've talked about is like different kinds of station designs. Like sometimes like the general public will come up to like a charging station or like, who the heck designed this? This is like so cumbersome, so like not user friendly. And that's something that it bothers both you and I, because like from a design and installation standpoint, you're like, oh, you can make these like couple tweaks and it would have just changed stuff. And like kind of how do you see that as an electrician when you see like a plan set and you're like, this doesn't seem like it's going to make sense for like where we're actually installing this.
Yeah, it's definitely a little frustrating, but I've taken a step back, and rather than just get frustrated and install it, I've been trying to really take the step forward and try to like just bring up concerns. Not so many, it's not really issues, but it's concerns for the end user, because this is a new developing field and a new developing industry that we're having the just expanding on what you've seen in the past. You only know what you know, and you only know what you've been taught or seen in the past. So helping someone, hey, remember on this last site we had this issue where we put this charger here. The customer had to pull up too close to it. We couldn't really get the cable off. And it's one thing to deal with some small level 2 chargers, some 9.6 kW chargers, like your 40 amp level 2 charger. But when you start dealing with this bigger stuff like DC fast chargers, 30 kW, 60 kW, 120, 180s, or even the larger ones with the remote power cabinets, it's hard to lift these cables. So if you get a bollard in the wrong spot, you can't have access to the charger doors. You can't service it. Or the end user can't really get it in the right direction. A lot of companies, a big development I see coming, and what we've seen in some like new releases of chargers is cable management. Cables are heavy. It's not like your typical gas pump. So anything they can help alleviate like kind of the weight and the pressure on those cables and the ground on the customer. I don't think your grandma's not going to be able to grab a 184 charger and plug in her
That's true.
plug in her Ford Lightning. Don't know if grandma will have one, but
I hope so.
cool grandma, man. So getting some of that stuff is going to be tough. So the more like development, and I feel the more we talk to engineers, we talk to charging development companies and the end users that could possibly, we're electricians, we may not have the say, but if we're relaying this message back to a FedEx, Republic Services, or any end user that may have a little more clout with the buying power, they may be able to talk to someone and say, hey, this needs to be a change. Like we're dealing with this, we're putting our workers at risk having to move this cable every single day. And this is a concern with health and safety on the site. So it's definitely just something making people aware, and then also try to do your best at how can we help them with that. There's other cable management you can add. There's different ways you can put the charger. There's a lot of this right now, since it's so new, is just thinking outside the box and thinking about how we can help people, help the whole industry to grow, because if you're in it right now, you're in it pretty early, and it's going to be, I see a long road ahead of us. So
Nice. And then, one thing that kind of seems to bite developers in the butt a little bit later on in the process is with like telecommunications. And that's something that's kind of like tends to be kind of like an afterthought, right? It's like, well, what's my cellular connectivity here? Because all these DC fast chargers and level 2 chargers will have modems in them, or there's a master controller inside that's actually talking to the cloud. And that's how a user is able to authenticate their charging session. And then kind of from like, your standpoint installing these, like, how have you kind of dealt with that, and how have you made sure that, these chargers are going to at least work with the cloud and with all the telecommunications hardware?
yeah, it's a good question, because it definitely, from what I've seen in the past, and we're actually experiencing this right now on some projects, is the cellular signal has been a little bit of an afterthought, and it's actually the biggest factor in almost the whole project itself. So it's one of those things. It's 2023. We kind of expect cell service to work everywhere. Well, you go in certain parking lots, parking garages, you go in busy metropolitan areas, and there's just a lot of cellular noise, which is affecting cell signal. And especially when there's multiple cell signals around, there's Wi-Fi signal. Everyone's got everything. There's Wi-Fi signal everywhere. Well, that's impacting a lot of this signal that we need to run these charger networks. And what the charger networking is, one thing, it's not just being able to pay for the charger. It's not being able to have the end user collect money on that, or to see what the charger's producing. It's the biggest factor is the load management. And as many people know, a lot of this EV charging can't get installed without load managing because of the lack of infrastructure on the utility grid. So you can't load manage without the network side. So there's right away this new system we install. We go put 40 level 2 chargers in a parking garage on a 200 amp panel. Well, if the networking side's not working, instantly we can't release that to the customer unless we derate every charger to 8 amps. Well, you might as well go plug in at your house and have your 120 outlet plug it in. Maybe, it's not even going to work. So it's not feasible. It's feasible, but it's not beneficial and it's not what the end customer was looking for. So really looking at, I mean, there's having to be some investments in cellular testers and looking at different ranges, and it's so particular. But getting the full understanding from the charger company you're working for on how their network works, how the chargers are talking to charger. There's so many different areas, and every company, every charger company, and every network company is working on a different platform. So understanding that and understanding how we're going to actually produce this and how we're actually going to make this work is such a huge thing. And unfortunately, to go over what CJ said again, it's been an afterthought. And then it turns into being, oh man, we need a connection between all these chargers. Oh, well, that's going to be a problem. Like the pipes all ran or the underground's all completed. So yeah, really thinking about that beforehand is been a huge help. Trying to alleviating stress down the road of when you get to commissioning, you're like, well, we can't see any of these chargers on the network. So that's a bummer. And that's a hard, not so much on the charger installer side, but for the charger company you're working for and that's hopefully paying you, for them to call and be like, well, we got a bunch out of work because we kind of overlooked this. So it's a hard one.
Yeah. And when it comes to maintaining these pieces of equipment, right? Like, I go out, charge my car on road trips. This car is not electric, it is a rental, and I cannot get Concur to allow me to rent an EV yet, but I will try to figure that out. But when I'm out there with my own EV, sometimes like, the charging stations are broken and like, I've heard that they're hard to repair. Like, what's been your experience in some, when you guys have gone out to make, you know, tweaks to things or change things out? Is there like a difference between like how easy they are to maintain depending on the manufacturer?
Manufacturing's a big thing. Some of the new chargers, unfortunately, there's not many replaceable parts in them, and there's factory seals on them that they're not actually even letting you into the hardware to just see. I mean, there's so many little moving parts where you could just change out, say, a little motherboard or have something like that, but they're voiding the whole warranty if you open it up. So we enjoy working with the chargers that you can actually like get into. If it's a bad cable, then maybe we can replace the cable, even if it's an aftermarket cable, but we can replace it rather than having to replace the whole charger. So we try to focus more working with the companies that have some replaceable parts because it's beneficial down the road if we have a tight turnaround. When you're dealing with public charging, it's not as crucial to have it done in a short lead time. But when you're working with fleets, they have negotiated downtimes that they have to have everything fixed. So if it's a charger that you can't really replace any parts, uh, it gets a little tough if you don't have backup chargers on hand. So that gets a little hard. And then also, I would say one of the biggest issues with a lot of these chargers and stuff we're running into is on the network side. So having a system that they can remote access. Most people that have ever installed an EV charger on a network will know they're like, oh, we need to go out to site and turn the breaker off and turn it back on. Well, it's like you can only call the site facility so many times to do that. They're like, why isn't this thing working? So that gets a little frustrating, but having a system where they can go in remotely access and kind of see. Another benefit we worked with the company before where we installed cameras on all their not all their chargers, but in the charger area, so they can physically go back and maybe see when an issue happened. Okay, hey, we have this. We keep getting an issue when this type of car plugs in. We keep getting an issue when this is happening or this is happening. So that gets a little. That's been helpful. Not a lot of people do it, but that's been a helpful thing when we can kind of go back and see some logistics of maybe what is causing this issue, or maybe it's a car because there's so many moving parts with cars with the different type of software on the cars, the chargers. There's so many different variations that it could be a lot of things. It could just be the car and it couldn't be the charger. So there's so many moving parts, but just trying to give you any information you can could definitely help. So having a camera or something like that, or a charger that can pull network logs on, like, they know what type of car pulled in. That's also been very beneficial to try to determining what the problem is or how we fix it.
Nice. And like as an electrician, like what's the hardest place to install EV charging? And I think I know the answer, but like in your opinion, like what's like when you get like site plans, you're like, oh my God, we're installing here. This is gonna be hard.
City of San Francisco and parking garage. Just because they make you they make you updo the sprinkler system.
Yeah.
No, it really depends. I mean, it depends on what kind of doing one charger 500 feet away from a switchgear is really not cost effective to a lot of people. It's going to be really expensive. But if you and then some people aren't into underground work, some people are in underground work. It's really site specific. It's what's kind of driven, who it's for, who we have to work around to do it. If it's a new construction job, if it's an existing construction job, is this a an open area that's open to the public on a day-to-day basis? We can't shut off stalls. We can shut off stalls. So there's so many areas. I mean, the ideal situation is you have your switchgear right there, and you can pipe down the wall between 50 and 100 feet, and you can put some level 3 chargers. But that's an easy install. But also a lot of level 3 chargers, like the bigger DC fast chargers, are only designed to be bottom fed. So then you run into an issue where you're having to do concrete pads in an existing parking garage, and there's not many applications where they don't make very good additional bases on a lot of these chargers that you can make them so they're side fed, top feed, or anything like that. So that would be a development I would like to see on the charger side, is making these level 3 chargers so you can feed them from different areas for different installation. Not all level 3 DC fast chargers get installed in a outside parking lot. When they do, it's a piece of cake. When you put 5 180 Terra 184s in a parking lot, you shove a 3-inch pipe up, and it's a easy day. Switchgear straight from the switchgear to the charger. Those are the cookie cutter nice installations in a straight run. So
Nice. And if you were to snap your fingers and kind of solve one thing for this industry from your perspective, like what would it be and why? Like what's like the one thing you wish you could have?
some sort of standard on more like well, they finally got like Chatimo's not as popular right now, so we're more with the CCS1 cables on the DC fast chargers, but a little more like just standards and consistency between the companies. Like you're always going to get some differences with different size, different capacities, and different networks and stuff like that, but more, I would say, more user friendly on the installation side. A lot of them you can't set any anchors after the charger's set. Like you have to set the charger down, mark the anchors, pull it up, set the charger on top of the anchor. It's always easier if you could set the charger like your switch gear and drill the anchors afterwards in case there's a little movement or anything like that. So I would say installation friendly for a lot of these companies, and then going to that is like these cable managements, like making these a little more user friendly as well for the installer and the end user.
Yeah, I think like especially with the cable management, I think that's a huge one that I think both the installers, the end users have like a pretty good alignment on that. I think everyone wants that to be better. And then from the usability or the installability standpoint, I know a lot of the newer hardware that's coming out is starting to address a lot of these things, but it's not all there. I mean, like, you and I will open up some of these and it's like, okay, well, if you're gonna get a drill in there, like how, how's that gonna work, right? It's just, it gets cramped and it's harder for people to install things. So
For sure. And then we've all been to a parking lot where there's level 2 chargers everywhere and there's cables laying all over the ground because it's like the hose at your house. Your wife waters the plants and she leaves the hose across the whole front yard.
Yep.
Because she's going to water it again tomorrow. So they don't, why put it away? So that's what these charger company, they just throw the holster back on the ground, or throw the cord end back on the charger, and then leave the cable for everyone to drive around or something like that. So I mean, the gas industry adopted it a long time ago to get all the hoses up in the air and have it retract automatically, kind of have it so there's no tripping hazards and things like that. So I think that'll be a big development as we move forward on stuff like that. It is also a little harder because there's no a development I'd like to see on the charging end of the vehicles is a more standard on where they charge from, where the charging ports
I would
are.
love that.
You have You have some fleets charge in the front, some regular vehicles charge in the back, on this side, in the front. And so it's like, if they could come up with a standard on where it would go, to me, it would be, these aren't gas pumps, but these aren't pull-through chargers. So to me, the most beneficial for installation side and for use of everyone and not having cables and tripping hazards and all that stuff around is having the charging port in the front of the vehicle. The chargers go right in the front of the vehicle, it charges. If you take that to the fleet side, then you don't have to have as long as cables. You don't have to, you may be able to take the chargers back a little to maybe protect them from vehicle traffic and accidents because you don't need as cables as long. So definitely standardizing the charging port area on vehicles and the fleet vehicles would be very, very helpful.
Nice. So I think that's it. We're about the half-hour mark, and we got a little bit of a drive ahead of us, so we're gonna be shooting the shit and stuff. But I just want to thank you all for joining. If you like this content, like and subscribe this page, and if you have any comments, please put that down in the comments section. I'll be responding to all those. And then also, if you want to get hold of Jacob Booth, I'll put his contact down to Booth Electric. He does construction all over the Bay Area, and I guess
state of California and kind of expanding out of the state too. So, yeah, if you guys ever have any questions, reach out and hope to see you guys in the field sometime.
yeah. Thanks all. Talk to you later.